This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
We are here because of the July 20th, 2021 CSIS memo that indicated that a Beijing diplomat accredited by this Liberal government was targeting a sitting member of Parliament, Michael Chong, by threatening to sanction his family in Hong Kong. This memo was sent to the Prime Minister's department, the PCO, and for 2 years, the Prime Minister did nothing. The government did nothing. The Prime Minister repeatedly claims that he first learned about this memo in the Globe and Mail. When did you learn about the memo?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. As I said to Mr. Chong at the time of the CSIS briefing to him, I learned about it in the Globe and Mail. I had not previously seen the report, nor had the Prime Minister.
You learned about it in the Globe and Mail, and then suddenly, after it was reported in the Globe and Mail, two more MPs, Aaron O'Toole and Jenny Kwan, have been briefed by CSIS that they too were targets of the Beijing regime. When did the Prime Minister first become aware that these MPs, including the former leader of the opposition, was targeted by Beijing?
The Prime Minister was not made aware of the targeting against Mr. Chong or Ms. Kwan before recent events and reporting. That has been done by CSIS. So CSIS has brought this forward to him in the last 2 to 3 weeks. You
said the Prime Minister wasn't aware in the case of Mr. Chong or Ms. Kwan. What about Mr. O'Toole?
Or Mr. O'Toole is my understanding.
And he would have learned about that, you're saying, since May 1st?
Yes.
And when did you become aware that Ms. Kwan and Mr. O'Toole were targeted?
In the last 3 to 4 weeks.
In the last 3 to 4 weeks, and how did you become aware of that?
Through a briefing from CSIS.
It seems to me inconceivable that we have at least three sitting members of Parliament that were targeted by Beijing, including by an accredited diplomat, and that you didn't know, and the Prime Minister didn't know, and only now, coincidentally, that it has been revealed in the Globe and Mail, is action being taken. How is that possible? How is that conceivable that neither the National Security Advisor, which is you, or any of the former National Security Advisors, or the Prime Minister were completely in the dark about this? It seems to me, Ms. Thomas, and I'll let you respond, but it seems to me that this is a breakdown of the machinery of government under this Prime Minister's watch. Would you at least agree with that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cooper, as I said previously, I wasn't here in 2021, and I cannot account for the lack of information flow to the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office, and I'm not going to speculate. I agree that there needs to be a better management of intelligence that is coming into deputy ministers' offices, into the NSIA office in order to brief the Prime Minister and brief ministers. And we have taken steps to ensure that will happen. And not only to brief, but to provide advice on what should be done with the intelligence. Because reading the intelligence is one element of this problem. Giving advice on what to do about it is the second part of the problem, and we have strengthened both of those processes.
Ms. Thomas, through you, Madam Chair, you've said that the Prime Minister didn't know, and you didn't know. So that's not just a matter of what to do about it or how to act on it. You said he just didn't know. But except for the fact that what we do know is that in the case of Mr. Chong, the Minister of Public Safety was emailed about it by CSIS in May of 2021, but he didn't have the login information to his email after 18 months on the job. And then this memo was sent by CSIS not to anyone, but to the PCO and specifically the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor. So again, how is it that the Prime Minister didn't know? Why were those MPs kept in the dark? And in the face of all of that, would you not at least concede that that is a colossal breakdown of the machinery of government under this Prime Minister's watch?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I've said, I cannot account and I will not speculate about what went on in 2021, and I know you are seeing my predecessors and I know you're speaking to CSIS. I think that there was a breakdown in process, and we've rectified not only a breakdown in process, I think insufficient process. And so we have rectified those problems.
I would submit it's more than a breakdown in process. It is a colossal failure on the part of this Prime Minister that we would have 3 MPs that have been targeted. How many more MPs have been targeted by the Beijing regime?
CSIS will speak to you about their holdings when they're here.
Are those MPs going to be briefed, or are we going to find out about it in the Globe and Mail and then we're going to be briefed?
I think it's very clear from the direction given by the Prime Minister and the ministerial directive from Minister Mendicino to CSIS and to the other intelligence agencies in his portfolio that the expectation is, yes, MPs will be briefed on the totality of the holdings against them, regardless of the depth, the severity, the reliability of those holdings. So members of Parliament who are in the holdings of CSIS will be getting very thorough briefs.
On May 3rd, 2 days after the Globe and Mail reported that MP Chong had been a target of the Beijing regime and that CSIS had been aware of this, the Prime Minister told reporters that, quote, CSIS made the determination that it wasn't something that needed to be raised to a higher level because it wasn't a significant enough concern, end of quote. We know that that statement isn't true. Why did the Prime Minister say that?
Thank you very much for the question. In the early days of understanding what the scenario was and the intelligence that led to the document that was written in July 2021 that referenced an MP, it did not reference Mr. Chong. Nonetheless, it did talk about an MP being targeted. We were not aware that the underlying intelligence had been moved from CSIS into the system and distributed. So it was an error in terms of the information provided to the Prime Minister.
Did you provide that? Did you tell the Prime Minister that?
Yes.
And you specifically told him it had not been raised to a higher level?
I told him that it had not been briefed to him, and I didn't know what had left CSIS.
Well, that's very different than what the Prime Minister said, because he didn't say that that he wasn't briefed. He didn't say that he didn't know where it went. He said he made a very specific declaration that it had not been raised. So he said more than that. So again, why did he not state what in fact happened? Why did he mislead Canadians?
Madam Chair, I don't think that's an appropriate question.
Well, I think it is an appropriate question. I think Canadians have a right to know why it is the Prime Minister would make such a statement when it is turned out to be patently false.
Madam Chair, I think the Prime Minister reflected the information he had at the time. He told us to keep working. He organized a meeting with Mr. Chong, and we briefed Mr. Chong. Yeah,
and suddenly, 24 hours later, you call MP Chong, and you advise him that, contrary to what the Prime Minister had said only 12 hours or 24 hours earlier, but that wasn't so, that in fact the memo had gone to the PCO and had specifically gone to the then National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister. So what happened between when the Prime Minister made that very affirmative statement that it had not been raised to a higher level to your phone call with Mr. Chong, where you said, in fact, it was exactly the opposite of what the Prime Minister said?
Thank you for the question. Madam Chair, Mr. Chong in his briefing asked me if the memo had been distributed, who received it. I told him I did not yet know. And upon finishing the review of where it had gone, I briefed the Prime Minister and I returned the call to Mr. Chong as I promised I would.
And what did you find out? And how did you find that out?
We traced all the addresses. We found out who it had been sent to and tried to determine why it had not been briefed up.
And upon tracing all of the addresses, you discovered that it had gone to the director of, or the National Security Advisor, correct?
We did.
And who else did it go to?
Well, as I told Mr. Chong, it went to several deputy ministers, and it's incumbent upon the deputy ministers to brief those ministers.
Went to several deputy ministers. Which deputy ministers?
Deputy Minister of Public Safety, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Deputy Minister of National Defense.
It went to 3 deputy ministers plus the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor. And that happened in 2021.
Yes.
And it went nowhere.
That is correct.
You want Canadians to believe that?
Madam Chair, I don't think the integrity of my statements here and what I said to Mr. Chong are in question. It is absolute fact that the memo was distributed and it was not briefed to the Prime Minister.
Was it shared with any ministers?
Not that I am aware of.
Well, you were deputy minister.
I was.
Yeah.
I was on leave in July 21 when it was sent to my office, and when I got back, I focused on Afghanistan. It was not put in front of me.
So who did it go to in your office?
No one. It was identified.
It went into a black hole.
Right.
That's your answer?
Thank you. It was not briefed. I told you there was a flaw in the process. We've corrected that.
A big flaw.
So I'm just going to take a minute because I think this, we do pretty decent, and then there's like this giving the question and giving the answer. So I think we invited someone here today who comes with a really serious role, at least for me. So Ms. Thomas, your time and you being here means a lot to me, and I actually think to most members. And I would just say when we ask a question and then we say we're going to give you time to answer, then you give them time to answer. You don't provide them the answer. And for the best that I know, Mr. Cooper, you are not in the role that Ms. Thomas occupies, and she is here today to provide us the insights that we have asked for.
Sure, I respect Ms. Thomas, but she is in a very serious role, and what we're dealing with is a very serious matter, and I'm posing serious questions, and I think that's quite appropriate.
And I think you let her answer. You don't provide her answers for her. Thank you.